successful and a holding against at all times.
Be careful.
Government officials insist that this is an isolated incident of the packet of
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Dancing Toaster. This is Nelly, and this is the place where typically we wrestle with the intersection of faith and the unexplained. Today, I have a special treat for you. I was recently a guest over at Nevermore Hollows, a podcast that is put together by some dear brothers in the faith, Alan and Chris. They were so kind as to allow me to be a guest on their show, but they also said that I could share that show with you guys. So that's what we're going to be doing today. I want to invite you into that time. It was a really awesome time, just three brothers in Christ, all interested in similar things, but also three Christian creatives coming together and discussing what that is like as well, living in a fallen world and trying to stand out in a very loud world and interject a message of hope into all of the things that we're putting together. And we discuss all kinds of just wonderful things. So I wanted you to be able to hear that, to be a part of that. And I also would love for you to go check them out. So here is another plug for those guys over at Nevermore Hollows, and I hope you enjoyed today's interview. I have some really awesome stuff that I'm cooking up for you, and I really needed more time in order to do it justice. So them allowing me to share this with you guys was a huge blessing. So Alan, Chris, thank you so much for allowing me to share this with my audience. And Toasties, please show them some love over at Nevermore Hollows. If you love storytelling, they are really good at it. So head on over there, go check them out after you listen to this interview, of course. Well, I love you guys, and I'm out because I'm going to be in Nevermore Hollows, so give it a listen.
All right, you Nevermore Hollow psychos, we have an exciting special treat for you tonight. As you know, if you've been listening to the show for any length of time, I don't have that many shows that I listen to. You know, we've got our brothers at Cryptids of the Corn. We've got Myths, Monsters, and Mullets that we listen to, and Drunken Cryptids, which we love those guys. They're brothers, and they're brothers in Christ with us. But tonight, I have a show that I'm so excited about that I've just been deep into, the Dancing Toaster. And Brother Nelly is with us, and we got Chris Madman Goins.
Hello.
And I'll tell you this is the second attempt we've had at this show. We never have technical difficulties ever, but every time we try to talk to Brother Nelly, we do. Kind of makes you wonder if there's a spiritual attack afoot. So we're going to jump right into it. Nelly, take two. Let's tell
try
us
this
a little
out.
bit about yourself.
I would love to. First, thank you, Chris and Alan. I really appreciate you guys and just the opportunity to fellowship with you guys, and I'm super grateful. So thank you for the opportunity to hang out with you guys and share the weird stuff I got going on over at the Dancing Toasters. So I moved from Texas to Washington to plant a church. And Washington is wild. The Pacific Northwest is steeped in hauntings and cryptids and all kinds of stuff. I've always been into that kind of stuff. But up here, they're very anti-Christianity. So I like to try to use the peculiar, the weird, and the wonderful to build a bridge to folks that maybe wouldn't talk immediately about Jesus, but man, they'll talk to you about maybe a haunting, or man, they love Bigfoot up here, you know. So I like to try to use the weird and the wonderful to build a bridge to people, and the Dancing Toaster is a means of trying to do that on a much larger scale, and it's worked. So far, it has worked wonderfully, but even in my backyard, because even as I go around, the side of my truck has a Dancing Toaster on the side of it, because I'm always trying to grow the show. And, you know, as I'm going to coffee shops all the time, because coffee's huge up here, they're always asking, and they're like, oh, the Dancing Toaster, you know, what's that? I go, you know, it's my podcast. They say, what's it about? I say, it's a paranormal podcast. That's all I say. And I'm not trying to be deceptive. I'm just, you know, gentle as a dove, shrewd as a serpent, and saying, hey, it's a paranormal podcast. And they get excited. I give them I got little cards that have the QR code that'll take them to my Spotify. So one of the questions I always get about the show is the name. Where on earth does the Dancing Toaster come from? And it's a Ghostbusters reference. You see my Ecto-1 here, and you see I got a little Stay Puft guy back there. Actually, there's like dozens of Stay Puft little guys all over, but I love the Ghostbusters. And there's a scene in the second movie where they put the little pink slime into the toaster and play some Jackie Wilson, and it starts dancing around the table. And when I laid out a bunch of names for my wife last year, I said, which name do you like? She saw the name and the logo and was like, that's the one, because it's fun. It pulls you in. It's not preachy. I mean, it doesn't scream that it's a Christian show, and I like that it doesn't, because some people, they'll see it and immediately shut themselves off to it as soon as they see it. So, I mean, I'm having it is a second full-time job for sure. First job is pastoral ministry. Again, we moved here to plant a church, and that always takes first priority. But second to that is this amazing thing that's been, just kind of developing and years of being into weird things and having, I've always been a weird creative. It started with music, but all of that, how the Lord kind of uses things to culminate and all the things that you thought were meaningless. And why am I this way? Why have I taken these roads? And why am I where I am? And when they start to coalesce together, you're like, oh, wow, Lord, you're so much smarter than me. This is awesome. So the Dancing Toaster has become a way of building bridges to non-believers who otherwise wouldn't talk about quote unquote Christian things, but they love talking about spiritual things. And it's like, oh, well, I like to talk about those things too. And then second to that is also trying to reach out to Christians to say, hey, we need to be an authority on these things. We need to be people have questions, and you can't just write everybody off all the time. It's incredibly insulting when they say, tell us a story. Oh, that didn't really happen. That's nonsense. You made that up. No, that's insulting. You're either accusing them of lying or hallucinating. That's not a great way to introduce somebody to a God who wrapped himself in humanity and walked around and did all these miraculous things. They can just as easily say, that didn't happen. You're making that up. So we can be incredibly dismissive of the supernatural. And I'm like, have you read your Bible? I mean, it's incredibly supernatural. And I think if we would be a little bit more open-minded, not so open-minded our brains fall out, but open-minded enough to say, you know what, I think maybe you really did have an experience. Let's turn to an authoritative source to try and make sense of it. And that's what I try to do is say, hey, Christians, let's open up our minds a little bit back to having a supernatural worldview as the apostles did, in my opinion, and also build a bridge to non-believers that may not talk about Jesus directly, but I sneak Jesus in through the weird and wonderful.
Right. Well, you have to, because one of the things that Chris and I have been talking about over the years is if somebody comes to you who's a non-believer and says, "Hey, I had this experience," you have to accept that so that you can. Yes. They're giving you something. So now either they're lying or they had a real experience. But as a Christian, you need to take it, explore it, and try to guide them. And what I get frustrated with is how many pastors I know that will not touch the paranormal. They won't touch it. Mm-hmm. And so I look at this as a mission field because, like you said, to kind of correlate with what your life journey has been, we all have a journey that's led us to where we are. I feel that God is a weaver of all things, so we're where we are because He has woven it together. Yeah. So if I love the paranormal and I want to, play around in that world, I have to go into it with a sober Christian attitude so that I don't get pulled in a negative way. And I have to understand it. I have to be able to explain it. And I have to be able to use it to engage people who are seekers or non-believers. And what we find is a lot of folks who listen to our show, and I imagine your show too, especially up there where you are, they might love that kind of stuff, but they reject the message, right? So what you do is you lure them in by, hey, we accept that this is a possible reality, a divot box or whatever, and we're going to accept it as a possible reality, and we're going to explore that, and we're going to dig into it, and then we're going to present a Christian view of that. So now you do that very well. We are, and I love Chris and I always say, we always use that term, as peaceful as doves, as wise as serpents. We use that all the time when we talk about our show, and being a lure. So what we try to do is pull you in, tell you the story, And we pepper it a little bit differently than you do. You smack us right in the face at the end of your episode. You're like, here you go, buddy. This is the Christian worldview right here. And we love that. But we take a subtler approach. It's getting less and less subtle with us. We've always been, tried to be seed planters, and we're moving more into being bolder and just presenting it. Like I've got an episode that's coming out at the 1st of August where there's a battle that happens, and the evil is using, death metal lyrics. Now, I love all music. I'm wearing a Melvin's T-shirt. I love music, right? My son and I play in a death metal band, but even that is an approach to plant seeds in a mission field, right?
Well, yeah.
So what we do is, in this particular episode that's getting ready to drop, the protagonist combats the evil with psalms, right? Song for song. Right.
That's awesome.
So we're getting bolder in our storytelling, but we're also encouraged when we hear folks like you be so bold. So with all that, I want to ask you a couple of questions to get us started in a direction. The way you approach it is almost like a gumshoe dime novel kind of thing. It's your narration. One, we love your narration. And that's what separates you from all the other podcasts that are out there that are maybe talking about similar things. Is your approach, you take a writer's approach to it. I can tell that you've sat down. Yeah, you've applied writing. Go ahead, Chris.
I'm just saying, he also has a very good voice. And, it's easy to listen to. And again, if you could have the best story in the world, if you ain't got the way to present it. And as a pastor, you gotta be easy to listen to.
Right.
I know a gentleman who is a very good pastor, but he has a voice that is like nails on a chalkboard, and it's really hard to listen to him for a while because you're just kind of, but you present yourself very well, and the stories are good, and you get hooked. For me, you get hooked with, this is going to be about the Rain Man, and I've heard that story, and I was like, oh, okay, let's get some more. And then I get into it, and Alan knows the way I started out with Nevermore is that we met each other in a grocery store, and we've known each other for 30 years, but we kept seeing each other in a grocery store, and he'd go, hey, I got this podcast, give it a listen. So I gave it a listen, and then I started doing character sketches because I can see things in my head. If he tells a story, he describes his characters, I can see them in my head. And so then I put them down on paper, and he's like, hey, I need an art director. So here I am. But with you, again, I can see it in my head. I can see the stories. And you present yourself. It's a total package. It's very good.
Right. And that comes from his ability as a writer, because clearly you've got good writing chops. So my question in that, is how do you balance telling a supposed true story from that writer's point of view? Because it almost feels like, because you have such a good narrative, how do you balance the truth that you found with some of that narration that maybe you're filling in the gaps?
So one of the ways this whole show from the beginning has been me also learning with my audience, because I'm expert of nothing. I don't pretend to be an expert of anything at all. Some of these cases I am vaguely familiar with, like the Rain Man. I knew a little bit about it, but as I did that episode, I became thoroughly convinced of something occurring because of the number of evidence, or the amount of evidence, and the people presenting that evidence. But then unexpectedly, my heart began to just break for this man who, if this event was real, had to be incredibly traumatic. And if his backstory is what he claimed it to be. also incredibly traumatic. And then I found out after I released the episode that he had passed away just recently, and I was like, man, I hope he found peace. And with this last episode with the Dybbuk box, I mean, I've known about this object for a long time. I set off to tell a story, but even as I'm doing my research, as I'm learning about it and finding out what is the most current information we have on it, and it's like, oh man, he came out and said it was a fraud from the beginning. And so I'm learning as I go. So I'm writing the script as I'm researching a lot of the time, because I'm incredibly overwhelmed right now with 2 sermons a week, as well as I was trying to do 2 shows as well. And that's been very hard, especially
it's
with
too hard. Too hard.
It is. It has been, and I'm struggling to keep up, if I'm being honest. But I love what I'm doing, so I'm doing the best I can when I can. But I'm a lot of the time researching as I'm writing the script. So this last one especially, it really transformed, and I love my characters. I mean, they feel more and more real. I hope I'm not getting schizophrenic, but they're becoming more and more real as I present Dr. Wright and Vinny, because they allow me to kind of take this, if I'm holding the Dybbuk box, they allow me to turn it and look at it from different angles and be divorced from it. But man, I really was like, quote unquote, convinced by Dr. Wright, as I always use him to be the voice of antagonism towards whatever we're looking at. I also want my audience to know that just because I believe in these phenomenon, I'm also not naive to assume that all of it is true. We cannot and we should not accept all of it as true. And so I allow it to take, I'm going on the journey before my audience does. Just like when I'm doing sermon prep, I tell my congregation that I get rocked by this before you do. God has to rock me with this truth before you get rocked. And so as I'm preparing these episodes, I get to go on this journey before my audience does. And sometimes it truly is. Sometimes I don't know where it's going to go. The Dybbuk box was one of those things. Annalise Michelle, it was a 2-parter. My first 2-parter, man, that rocked me, and I can be a little controversial as far as some of the things that I say about certain denominations and things, because I'm kind of unapologetic in some of my theological positions as well. It's like, well, it's my show, so if you don't like my positions, you don't have to listen, but you also don't have to agree with me. I think we should be able to be grown up enough to say, I agree with X, Y, and Z. I didn't like that he said that, but hopefully there's enough that you do enjoy that you're like, I'm going to overlook this area, this one thing that I disagreed with him on. Some people can't do that. And I'd say, well, that's not a very grown-up approach to life, but, to each his own. But the Annalise Michelle episode, man, that rocked me in a way that I didn't expect. I'm recording in my booth, and it's a closet. It's nothing fancy. I converted a closet. And so I'm sitting there recording. I'm getting choked up because we made movies, The Exorcism of Emily Rose or whatever, based on this poor real life individual. And we forget that they're people. Even as consumers of paranormal, supernatural stuff, it's like, no, real people were involved. And when I'm teaching the Bible, I want my congregation to understand Mark was a real person. Paul was a real person. Samuel, thousands of years ago, was a real person. And so I connect these real historical figures with the text, with their hearts. And I'm bringing all those things to the show as well. And I think it's one of the things, and I've been told this by others, it's like, it does give my show a unique voice, because I'm approaching it with a shepherd's heart. I can't divorce myself from my primary profession. So I get to approach it as a shepherd first, then as a storyteller. But also, like I said, I'm not a formal scholar. I'm not an expert of anything. So I get to go on a journey with my listeners. My position can change as I'm writing the script, and I'm not afraid to let that come out. And who knows, maybe a past episode that I did 6 months from now, I might do a follow-up that says, hey, I found additional information and this is what I'm doing with it. And I think there just needs to be more humility from Christians on these topics. But then even those who are the believers like Vinny that accept everything as gospel, it's like, no, we need to be a little more restrictive, because there are some shows that will present everything with no discretion, with no kind of critical element. And it's like, ooh, that can be equally as dangerous. So yeah.
And that's one of the things I love about your characters is you lay it out, and then you have different approaches. You, like you say, you've got one who is a full-on believer, one's a skeptic, and then you try to come in with, discernment and cut through that. And that's literally how we're supposed to live life. We're supposed to be able to take what's before us, what we're being told, use discernment as the way to get to the truth.
And I like, Alan, that you said discernment. I'm going to piggyback off that a second, because when it comes to discernment, it's in creative mediums of all kinds, whether it's writing, whether it's a cartoon, whether it's a movie. You know how you got the angel and the demon kind of trope, but Dr. Wright and Vinny are not the angel and the demon on each shoulder, because so often in life we're not choosing between right and wrong all the time. We're choosing between that which is good and that which is better, and it's trying to discern that which is right from that which is almost right. And that can be even harder, because Satan, even with his temptation, he doesn't come to you and immediately suggest the worst possible thing ever. He slowly compromises and introduces, well, I'm not going to tell you to have an affair, but I'll tell you to look at this thing that you shouldn't be looking at. And and with information, it's the same way. And so, again, not that the devil and the angel on the shoulder, yes, we have those scenarios in life, but I think what Vinny and Dr. Wright present is it's not always, when we're trying to use discernment, it's not always that cut and dry. Look at the doctrinal differences we have amongst denominations. We're all looking at the same text and coming to different conclusions. That's why we have over 3,000 denominations globally. So it's like, let's approach with a little humility. And I try to do that. I know I don't always come across that way because, I appreciate it. The earlier episodes, I almost want to go back and redo them. And my wife's like, no, you got to leave them. You got to leave them. And
I agree with her.
It shows the journey. The show has developed. I've developed my sermons are getting better because of the show too. I mean, it's just making me a more rounded individual, and I'm having a lot of fun doing it. It's hard work, but it's been a really fun time, and I get to meet awesome people along the way that I never would have met otherwise had I not been recording this creepy stuff in my closet.
Well, look, the same thing here, man. I say that all the time. I go, when I started this, I didn't realize there would be the opportunity to meet people. When you're putting yourself out there, you want to connect, right? You want to connect, but I thought it would be this disassociated connection. I mean, that's a weird term to use, but that's really what it was, is that there would be connection from a distance, and I would never get to interact with the folks who are checking out the show. Man, was I wrong? I mean, like you say, I get to meet other podcasters. I get to meet other people who are into the show or just the topic in general. A couple of things I want to say on what you were talking about is time versus content. I've tried so hard to put 2 stories out a month, and you just can't do it. You just cannot give your best by overdoing it. So I came across something earlier today, and I was listening, and it's an old concept of less is more, right? Mm-hmm. So I've been playing around this season. Last season I was putting out two full-on stories a month. That takes writing, editing, recording, editing, sound effects, editing, listen to it a final time. It just wears you down. And then I was trying to add, other content. So just for the sake of making sure that the show's quality doesn't slip, the quantity has to. Okay. Yeah. So I would on that, brother, because what you're putting out is awesome. And I know you're like us. We're trying to get this to be something that makes a living, you know? So yes, I think we get sucked into the to the idea of more content is what's going to get us there. Well, to some degree, yeah. But at the end of the day, it's the quality of what we're putting that's going to get us there. So number 2 is, when you're talking about the angel and the demon, Chris and I, we totally agree with that. We try to make it black and white in Nevermore Hollows. There's good versus evil. Mm-hmm. That's what our stories ultimately come down to, good versus evil. But you're right. In the real world, it's muddier than that. And Satan doesn't want it that clear. He wants it to be ambiguous sometimes.
Yes, he does.
And of course, you have given me a lot of great stories to listen to, and but you've also put words or names that I will use for the rest of my life. and one of them is what you called the King James version of the Bible in your last episode, King Jimmy. That's going to be with me forever now.
Good.
Yeah, that's going to be controversial in the South for sure. But yeah, I agree with you.
You know, there's places, right? I used to be a Sunday school teacher for high school kids, and I was told many times that I was not teaching from the right Bible because it was
my goodness,
right James. And I went, well, you know who wrote the King James Bible? And I said, who had it? That's why they were like, who? I said, King James the First. That's who had it, translated.
Commissioned, yeah.
And they go, who? I said, you don't really think Jesus talked like that, right?
He didn't know. He didn't speak English in the first century.
Yeah, and he didn't look like Max Payne-inspired either. But
right,
yeah, that's one of my. I saw that in a movie, and I went, "Oh wow!" Because Max Payne-inspired played Satan in every other movie he was in. But except for that blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus. Wow. But yeah, it's we try very hard, and Alan is very good of throwing stuff in there that people are getting gospel, and they sometimes they don't know it because of how he writes things. And I think I might have brought it up in our first episode, our first interview with you, is that we have a code 612 that the local police department used, and it's stuff like that I love. Easter. I can call them Easter eggs like that, where I can go, oh, I know what that is. I know what that is. And he's very good at it. And it's like I was telling my daughter about your podcast last night because I believe she would like it. I said, well, he's a pastor, but I said his podcast is very well done. I said, and you don't know you're listening to a sermon until you get to the end. And I went, wow, he did a great job at that. That was very cool. I'm too into the story. And then I went to the end and I was like, man, okay, cool. Great job. So hopefully, she will start to listen.
Yeah. And
that'd be awesome.
What I love about your podcast too is kind of to dovetail off what Chris is doing. I have struggled. I prayed about it, and I've talked to folks about it. Should I be bolder? Should I be bolder? And I was talking to a priest here about a year ago, and he's an Orthodox priest, and had a great conversation with him. Was having coffee with him, and we were talking about the type of boldness that you need when you're trying to reach people. And he said, look at it this way. Don't put too much pressure on yourself, because number one, you need to be the lure. You need to be the lure to lure people in. So if you're presenting yourself in a way that they go, I really want to know more about that, and you've pulled them in, and then you hit them with your theology, already there's a relationship there. And like what we try to do is we try to set a relationship with the type of storytelling, good storytelling, good writing, good narration, great, character development that Chris and I do, and then Chris's voice work he adds a wonderful flavor to it. So if we can present the best possible show, and then by the end of it, you realize, hang on a second, these guys are Christians. And I think we tried to say this once before, where you go, people will say, well, that's a good movie, or that's good writing for a Christian. We should set the standard. There shouldn't be that quote in our vernacular. It should just be, wow, that was excellent writing. That was excellent narration. That was excellent storytelling, period.
Yeah, no, we touched on that briefly in our first attempt at getting together. Is well, actually, before I get to that, there are different strokes for different folks, right? I think one of the issues we make as Christians that doesn't need to be an issue is God uses all kinds of people, all types. All of the disciples were not exactly the same; they were all very different. So I assure you, when he started sending them out, even when you read the ones that did give us something to read, their voice is not absent from the text. I can tell the difference between when I'm reading John and I'm reading Paul. And I love that. I love that. When I describe inspiration as a doctrine to people, it's like, think of a pen, like a Bic pen, but inside that is this little insert, that one is black ink, one is blue ink, one is red ink. The vessel looks a lot similar on the outside, but what's inside very much comes out very differently. And I think there needs to be C.S. Lewis's, and there needs to be J.R. Tolkien's as well. There needs to be those that are a little more direct and in your face, and then there are going to be those that kind of wrap these beautiful themes with a little more ambiguity. But I think both are beautiful. Both can be used by God. There are those that are going to hear from a street preacher with a bullhorn, and it's going to be what God uses to wrestle their attention. And then there are going to be those that are a little more like maybe Alan or Chris. I don't know how you are with evangelism, but for me, it's a little more. It's got to be a little more personal. I'm not the bullhorn guy. I can't be that guy. It's not in my personality, and I question its effectiveness. But for me, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to invite you out to coffee, and I'm going to get to know you, and I'm going to tell you about my life, and I'm going to tell you about my Jesus. And so, but I don't denounce the bullhorn guy. I don't discourage him or denounce him. I just know for me, God's made me differently. He's brought me to him in different ways. He has spoken to me in different ways. So I hate how we try to put too much in a box. I think God is very complex. I think the Bible's complex. And I think the ways that God does lure people to himself, draw all men unto himself, is very different across cultures and across countries and languages. And I think when you look closely enough at the Bible, even looking at John the Baptist and Jesus, did they both approach ministry the same way? Not at all. Not at all.
Totally
they were
different.
very different in their ministry. And Jesus said there's nobody among men greater than John the Baptist. So he commended what John did, but then when he set out to do his ministry, he did it very differently. So, people are going to receive differently. Some might like Alan and Chris's approach better than mine. That's okay. My job is not to get my feelings hurt because somebody liked their approach better than mine. It's like, I'm just grateful. When I get to heaven, I'm going to get a shirt that says "Lucky to be here." So, right. So I'm grateful that God does use different people. I know that if people step in a service with my church, they're not. You see how I got my T-shirt on, and I have tattoos and piercings, and some people, they're not going to like that. I have other people that are like, oh my gosh, I love how down to earth everyone here is. And they're drawn to that. It's like, hey, and if you don't like that, that's cool. Down the street, there's another church where everyone wears ties and shiny shoes. And I'm not disparaging them at all. You can go there and it's the same Bible. Hopefully they're going to teach it with the same sincerity and accuracy. But in any case, I love the C.S. Lewis and Tolkien kind of like, you can wrap it in more ambiguity and imagery, or you can be direct and say, Aslan is Jesus,
Right.
Anyways.
Well,
That was beautifully. Go ahead.
Very good. No, I've just say I've had discussions with my children about my children are grown. They're in their 20s. But, I said, look, my daughter has purple hair and tattoos, and my son doesn't. And but I was talking to my daughter. I said, look, there's a reason why why Jesus picked who he picked. And I said fishermen have never been straight-laced people. These are rough dudes because they have a hard job. I said there was a reason why when Jesus was born, the angels went to the shepherds first. I said, because they were the lowest. They were the ones who could not go to temple. He didn't go to the high end. He went to the low end, which means God wants everybody, and I love what you're saying is he personally, I would trust somebody with tattoos and piercings more than somebody who wears a tie all the time.
For me, I got no pretense.
Right.
To me, there's somebody who is cookie cutter, you can't speak to somebody who's had to get through some bad stuff, if you've not been there,
Right.
and so I would go with somebody like, like I said, with tattoos and piercings, who's been through it and now has seen that, hey, God loves me,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but even the way the way I look now, he said, come as you are. He didn't say get dressed up and get cleaned up. He said, come as you are. And so I'm cool with that. And, that's the way we have raised our children is, look, it don't matter, what you look like, as long as your heart's right, head on,
Yeah.
and
I love that. Yeah. No, you're good. You're right. And what you both are saying is God will use the right person to reach the right people.
Exactly.
So I love it. So let me ask you this, so to kind of circle back to where your gumshoe approach, it's got that gum store. I mean, it does, whether you mean it or not. That's the way I take it. It's that gumshoe, gum store stuff. And we even have a character called Tiberius Poe, who is a PI, and we try to write little elements like that with the similes and stuff like that. But like I said last time, you are a simile king, brother. We love it. I'm always inspired when I listen to your similes. But what made you take that approach?
No, that's a great question. So what happened is when I launched the second show, because I love paranormal, supernatural stuff, but I love true crime. I'm sick in the head. I love true crime, and so I always wanted to produce true crime content, but I said, well, how do I do it on brand? Because I want it to tie into the Dancing Toaster, which is supernatural, paranormal themes. So I said, well, what if I cover cults, which are by nature spiritual, because it is a religion. It's an awful religion in most cases if it's a cult, but it's still very religious in its themes. But then there are bizarre true crimes, like when I covered Rod Ferrell and his little teenage vampire cult. That it's like. So I wanted to cover bizarre true crime. I figured like that plays into the brand. So when that show launched with the documentary, basically that I did, big 2-parter on Heaven's Gate, I love, you can say I got a video game shirt on, Gears of War. So I love video games. I love older video games. And I say older, that I mean older than right now, because not necessarily like one of my favorite video games is called Max Payne. And it is, he goes undercover into the world of the mafia and stuff. And it's written with this film noir feel, and it's, comic book panels. And every time there's a story part between each level, and he's like, and I walked into the hotel, and it's like, so I didn't even grow up on the film noir style detective movies. I love Batman, so that was my favorite detective was Batman, the world's greatest detective. Right. But, and somebody called me Batman the other day because they were like, I don't know what you're going for with that Batman voice, but I love it. And I said, you know what? The fact that you compared me to Batman just made my whole week. Where's Rachel? But so the deep gravelly voice is my best awful Max Payne impression, because I loved the storytelling in that game so much that I was like, well, I'm telling true crime, so let me bring in this element so I stand out creatively. But you know what? I loved it so much that I thought it was going to be only a man-eating toaster thing. That's the second show. I thought that'll be how I differentiate between the two shows. But after doing it a few times, I was like, I want to lean into this. I'm having too much fun, and it allows my writing to also be a little bit different. So I just leaned into it for the other show, because I did a series of episodes that were about government cover-ups and kind of the weird things that our government has done, playing with the supernatural. And it just fit. But after that, I was like, no, I'm just going to use this, and I lightened up a little bit with the Rain Man episode, but then kind of leaned back into it. The Dybbuk box. I backed off a little bit, but the next one I'm going to lean back into it. Yeah. So, I never wanted to be it's kind of hard because I want to be creative. I want to stick out amongst there's so much content out there to be consumed. So I want to be unique, hence the characters, hence the film noir kind of, detective feel. But I never want it to be a caricature of itself. Yeah, I still want people to take it seriously, take the content seriously, even if I'm going to bring out Dr. Rat. I still want you to take it serious with the information. And I think those that are going to enjoy what I'm doing can still appreciate being silly, but still saying like, no, he takes the subject. I always say, even with my sermons, I say, I'm going to take the content seriously. I don't take myself too seriously, hence why I'll teach in a ball cap and a video game t-shirt, and some will see it as irreverence. And I just say, how the early church started? They were having Bible studies in houses, usually at night, because they just worked all day. So they came in, they smelly and sweaty, and they came in thirsty for the word of God to be poured out. And, so it's like, I don't have time for pretense. And I'm not going to be everybody's favorite, whether it's the sermons I'm preaching or the episodes I'm giving. But the film noir style, that detective feel, that came from my love of Max Payne and my desire to tell the true crime stories in a fun way. And it just hopped over because I enjoyed it too much not to keep doing it. So that's where that came from.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm glad it is, because Chris kept telling me, Alan, man, you gotta listen to this cat. You gotta listen to this cat. And he was bugging me more than he normally bugs me when he comes across a podcast that he likes, because he's trying, we love sharing things like this, right?
Right.
And I was like, well, gosh, man, he is a true fan of this show. I got to check it out. So the first one I listened to was the Sudbrink Calls. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And I started it, and I was expecting what you always hear on these, a talking head, and we'd talked about this before on the last one. One of the reasons I struggle listening to podcasts, especially anything true crime related, is they'll go, I got my information from the Chris Madman Goins podcast. And I'm like, well, why am I listening to you? And I'll go to Chris Madman Goins podcast, and he tells a slightly different version of the story. And he goes, well, I got that from the Nelly podcast. So it's just a copy of a copy of a copy. But when I started listening to yours, I listened to that episode, and I was driving down the road, and I went, I'm not listening to the right thing, because I was expecting what you always hear. But your narration was, I've gotten onto a scripted show, which I do love scripted shows, and there's a couple that I've listened to that I've been fans of. So I actually pulled off the side of the road, and I picked up my phone, and I was like, no, it's a dancing toaster. Yeah. And I was like, this is refreshing. And then listen to that one, and the next one was the nun one. And then I got to tell you, though, I know you on one of your shows you said that some of your true crime stuff isn't hitting as big as your paranormal. Brother, I love that true crime stuff you got going on.
Yeah,
I loved it. Oh my gosh. I think at some point that'll take off. I'm surprised it hasn't already. Cause like the witch down in Mexico, the one, whatever episode that was.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. I was driving slower.
Yeah.
I had people behind me mad at me because I kept slowing down listening to that show, man.
I was listening to all the ones about possession. And I'm working in a shop, and I was by myself, and I had my headphones on. I got fans going, I got machines running, and then one of the ladies up front came back and yelled my name. I about jumped out of my skin because I was to the story, because and I'm using machines that if I don't pay attention, I'm going to lose things, and sounds like.
Oh, that's hilarious. I've had people at my church that listen to the show. They'll say, I can't listen to your show with the lights off. And so, but you know what? I love that. Because good storytelling is going to suck you in, it's supposed
that's
to.
Right.
And I also, it's challenged a lot of people's notion on horror. And I know that's a topic that we touched on a little bit the last time we were chatting, is I'm not even somebody who partakes of a lot of horror medium or media at all. I'll play a scary video game before I'll watch a scary movie. And I think I watched a few more recently because of the show. If there's a movie that ties into a case I'm covering, then I'll sometimes try and catch the movie. There are certain things I'd rather not see just to spare my own self, and it still takes time out of my schedule to do that. But in any case, I think no matter what the story we're telling, to say that, to write off horror as a genre, as evil, I'm like, have you read Judges at all? Have you read Revelation at all? Like, these are crazy things that have happened, and it's not God putting a stamp of approval on it by recording it in the Word, but he recorded it there for us, Paul said to the Corinthians, for our benefit. So there's something in there that he found beneficial to us. And sometimes, when it was beneficial, scaring the mess out of somebody, because a lot of the prophetic messages scare people. And so with my episodes on possession, I like that it spooked people a little bit. It wasn't necessarily, I'm not trying to scare people. I'm trying to tell a good story. And if you get spooked a little bit, I want you to know this was real. And I say real in that it happened to real people. Now, whether or not it was quote unquote real, as in what they thought it was it mental illness? Was it demonic possession? Was it both? Like Annalise Michelle, I'm convinced it wasn't A or B. It was C, all of the above. I really think that Satan has a field day creating confusion with possession versus mental illness and possessing mentally ill people. I think that there's nothing that says that can't happen. And I think he has a field day destroying those kinds of minds. But in any case, one other thought that just came to me, going back to some Alan said earlier with concerning time and quality versus quantity. Some that I thought of as far as how the show has developed. You can tell in the earlier episodes, I might have taken a theme and said, let me tell you all the places in the world that has this theme. And sometimes I'll still do that a little bit. But in the latter episodes, and what I've enjoyed a little bit more, is rather than taking giants and then show you all the places in the world that talk about that, which is impossible, but it's like, how about I take one case and now I'm going to talk about it a lot so we can really unpack this story, but then also think critically about it. And man, I enjoy that way more than trying to just tackle this big old topic. Let's tackle a case at a time. And it might introduce themes that are much larger that might get episodes down the line, but I can kind of inch you into it a little bit and then call back to previous episodes. Shameless plug. Say, hey, if you're a little lost right now, go check out this last episode because I talked about it for an hour and a half and I don't have time to cover all that again, but that'll, hopefully pull them down, suck them into the rabbit hole a little bit with me. And so,
it narrows that focus. Yeah. I like that it narrows the focus. No, go ahead, Chris.
No, I was just saying, I love, when podcasts do that, when they just say, I do too. Okay, we've got this has happened in all these places, but we're gonna talk about this. And then lots of times they will pull out details that I've never heard. Yeah. So then that's gonna add to my knowledge because I have a head full of useless knowledge. That,
my wife says the same thing about me.
Yeah, that one of these days, all this useless knowledge is going to save our lives. If I can, distract some criminal with, useless information. But it just adds to so somewhere down the line, if I am in a conversation with someone, especially at conventions and stuff like that, especially our one of the last ones we did, which was our very first horror convention. And, we talked to a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life. Just in that short 2 days. And if you have something in your head that they'll throw out some kind of something. And if you can acknowledge it and go, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. And then I'll direct them to the Dancing Toaster. Go, hey, you need to listen to this kind of podcast because he talks about that in this episode. and da 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 da. So it actually brings you closer to a lot of people if you have
Mhm.
Yeah.
if you can have one little more thing to add, then they'll take, well, and lots of times they'll take you a lot more seriously instead of just some dude who's trying to get them to listen to their podcast.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what we do. When we go to these cons, Nelly, we started, Chris has been going to cons for years, and he got me into them when he came on board with the show. And one of the things I love, man, we will, thousands of people walking by every day and just reaching out and engaging them. And what I'll do is I'll look for, like, if they're wearing a shirt or a tattoo or something that ties into what we do, and I just engage them. And, most of the time, well, I wouldn't say most time. I'd probably say 30, 40% of the time, we don't even get around to pointing them toward the show. It just becomes a conversation. But anyway, so to tie it back to this, sparking creativity, you were talking about creativity.
Mhm.
So, we're all creative. So you never know when that spark is going to hit, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes it comes out of nowhere. Well, I have this list of story ideas. Now, sometimes they're pretty fleshed out. Right, I'm sure you are the same way. Like Chris would have a sketchbook. He's just full of half sketches, rough sketches that he's eventually going to try to get to. So as a writer, I have all these story ideas. Now sometimes it's one word. I know there's a story there. It hasn't evolved yet in my mind. Things
Mhm.
haven't clicked yet. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 paragraphs of what this story should be. So I say this to go, I have had this one story idea for 2 years on this list. I'm not going to tell you what it is because it's an upcoming story, right?
Mhm.
Because I don't even know where to take this story. I was listening to one of
Mhm.
your episodes, and you said something in it was the Philadelphia experiment episode, and you said something, and out of the blue, just a ray of light came down and went, that's how you take that little nugget and you make it into a full-blown story. And I was like, thank you, Brother
Oh,
Nelly. I
wonderful.
now have another story. And
Oh,
when
great.
I'm thinking, well, it is the story I'm writing right now. And it's a Tiberius Poe story. He's our detective. So,
Mhm.
I will make sure that, I'll give you a little nod to going, Brother Nelly's podcast is the one that actually brought this idea into a full blown story. But I
That's
just
exciting.
love that creative, being able, you didn't even know that. You didn't even know us at the time when I was listening to that. We hadn't reached out to you, and you'd already inspired a story. So with that, you had said Max Payne was a reference or an influence for your narration style.
Mhm.
What are some other influences that you have that you think has shaped your show?
Oh man, I can't ignore the influence that some of the larger voices in my space have had. Haunted Cosmos was one of the first podcasts I ever came across that was Christians introducing people to, or Christians willing to talk about weird stuff. And when I heard how they did it, I really enjoyed it. Like when I first discovered Haunted Cosmos, I listened to all 12 episodes, I think, within 3 days. And I have a really busy schedule, so I'm listening to every free moment. I was listening to it because I hadn't come across other Christians that wanted to talk about this stuff since I was a youth pastor. The only other Christians that wanted to talk about it were the teenagers that I did youth ministry for 10 years, because they asked wonderful questions because they weren't afraid to. They would ask about how should a Christian think about aliens? How should a Christian think about Bigfoot and other cryptids? And we'd have I had a Q&A service every Monday, probably for about 7 years. And it was so fruitful and I loved it. And as one of the things I miss about youth ministry is just there's a lot less pretense with teenagers than with adults. They're not as worried what others will think when they ask those kinds of questions because they know their peers are thinking it too. Whereas with adults, they're kind of like, oh, I don't want nobody to think of me as kind of weird. But so creatively, Haunted Cosmos was like kind of this inspiration of, they do a little bit of storytelling. But one of the differences is theologically, they're heavily reformed. And this is not a dig. It's just a statement of fact. They're very reformed in their theology. So there are certain ideas that they maybe wouldn't entertain that maybe I would, because I have different theological positions. So I can, it's not to correct or counter anything that they're saying, simply to add another voice to the table, another position to the table. So they, as far as an idea of what I wanted the show to be, I think Blurry Creatures, again, is huge in the space, probably one of the biggest in the space as far as Christian and paranormal, biggest in the space. And they do a great job, but they're all interviews. So I knew I wasn't going to try to compete with them as far as that goes, because I'm not an interviewer. And so, but I also, they'll have almost anybody on the show, and that's good and bad. Yeah, and again, not a dig. It's just
Right.
like they've had some people on there that I've really been blessed by. Of course, Dr. Heiser was an early guest on there. They've had Dr. Judd Burton on there, some of my favorite guests.
Love Dr. Heiser, man.
Yes,
Love
that's-
him.
oh,
Oh my
me too.
gosh, he was so influential to me.
Amen. Me too. He was a major influence for the birth of the show as well. So they've had some wonderful guests, and then they've had some other people on there that I listened to, and I'm like, ooh, if I had a show, I wouldn't have ever brought them on. But again, that's just me. They're a little more open in their approach, which is fine. Again, I'm not offering a critique. I'm just saying, if it were me doing interviews, I might not have had certain guests on that they've had on, but man, they're very open-minded. So I kind of wanted to be in the space in between.
Right.
I'm not a reformed guy. I'm not an interview guy that's going to have just anybody on. I'm going to hang out somewhere in the middle, and I'm going to say, well, what do I bring to the table that's different? I'm a charismatic pastor living in the Pacific Northwest that's loved nerdy crap all my life. So how can I, bring that to the table? So creative inspiration outside of people within the space. I mean, I grew up reading comic books. I absolutely love comic books and anything. Yeah, I mean, Batman, I was big into Marvel comics until recently. Probably in the last 5 years, I've walked away from Marvel entirely, but I still love comic books. I've switched to Japanese comics, aka manga. I've really enjoyed some of the storytelling from manga and anime. That's really been influential in my storytelling approach and how I talk about things and even think about things, because that Eastern way of thinking is very, very different, and how they tell stories and how they see the supernatural in Japan is so different. I want to have an episode. Yeah. I'm going to have an episode all about kind of some of those themes. That's one of those things, Alan, that's like, I have an idea, but right. It's got a lot of fleshing out, because it's just such a broad thing. I need to narrow it down. And I think ultimately what it'll look like is, I was looking at some of my analytics, which is kind of a double-edged sword as a creative. But I was like, okay, where are my listeners at? And the vast majority, I'd say 90% of them are in America, but the 10% outside of America, where are they located? And I was looking at where they are, and I got it right here: Canada, UK, Australia, and New Zealand. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to pick a story from each one of those places. That
love that. Wow,
what's
brilliant
the biggest
idea.
What's that?
No, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yes.
So next, my next one that I plan on covering, give you guys some inside information here, is on Tuesday. I hope to release the episode on what's called the Great Amherst Mystery. I don't know how familiar you guys are with Esther Cox and what happened with her, but it's one of the most if you're Canadian, it's one of the most famous paranormal stories in Canada. And but for us, further south, it's like, I never heard of it. I had never heard of the Great Amherst Mystery until I looked at my analytics and said, okay, what's popping in Canada? I touched on a little bit, the Aykroyd family is from Canada, and in my Ghostbuster episode touched on a little bit of that, but I was like, no, what is their quintessential paranormal case? And Esther Cox, it was at the top of the list of all these things as I was researching. I was like, okay, so let's learn about her. Let's learn about what happened. And so that's my plan over the next few weeks, is to go international. Where are my listeners at? And I want to meet them, where they're at, and hopefully introduce my American listeners to things that are going on in other places. And so awesome. It's so far so good. I'm having fun with that. So anyways, creative influences, back to that question. Like I said, comic books have been a big part of shaping what I enjoy. Watching animation has always been a big part of my life, and I wish I paint, but I do acrylic on canvas, but I'm very limited because my time is so low. That's something I'd probably be a lot better at if I dedicated more time to it. But man, if I always wanted to do comic books, but I'm glad storytelling was still a part of God's plan for my life. It just doesn't look like what I ever imagined it to look like. So,
right.
Well,
It's like with me.
enough,
Go ahead.
it never is.
right.
When God's plan, my plan was to be an animator.
Mm-hmm.
And right when I decided to be an animator, Disney went, "Yeah, we're not doing that anymore. We don't have traditional animation anymore." And I went,
right.
But that led to where I am. I've done comic books, I've done children's books, I've done this. So I call myself a cartoonist, and because that's where I'm happy. But
That's cool.
I want to see some of your art, dude. I really do.
Oh
yeah, that would be dope.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll share some. I had planned on doing some pieces for my toasties, for my listeners that were kind of all of my stuff. Full confession, my art that I release for the show, you can tell is AI generated. I'm a one-man show, and I don't have time to produce that stuff on my own. I hope to one day it not be that case. Plus, I'm broke. I'm still trying to develop this thing to be able to pay my mortgage, but it ain't there yet. So AI has helped me to generate those thumbnails and things like that. But I love, as it gets better, I love what it's doing. But I was like, well, what if I were to do, like, if I were to have done a piece, what would it have looked like? And so I wanted to do, some pieces acrylic on canvas of some of the thumbnails from the episode, just kind of redone, and maybe offer those to my patrons, maybe do some giveaways. I wanted to do some merch giveaways this summer, but man, this summer has been tough financially, but I do hope to do some giveaways for those that have been faithful, my day ones that have been faithful, and like I've been able to build like with awesome people like you guys, but even with some of my listener base, I got a handful of these are people who don't know me. All they know is they know me as a voice through their phone or through their computer, but they enjoy it so much that they're willing to come onto my Patreon and to contribute even $5 a month in this economy. $5, I mean, that's a lot for some people, right? And it's a lot for me right now too. So it's like the fact that they don't know me, and I'm just a voice that they meet with on Tuesdays through their phone, but they enjoy it so much, they believe in it so much that they're willing to say, no, I'm going to put my money behind that. Like, I am so very grateful to them. I mean, I got people who've known me my whole life that haven't even shared the link on their Facebook. And I'm like, what does a guy got to do? It's funny how it's not until you die where you find out all the people that were really appreciative of you. It's like, why do we wait until people die before we show them how appreciative we are? But my toasties, my patrons, those that are willing to say like, I enjoy this guy. I believe in what he's trying to do. Like, oh man, like I've been able to interact with some of them, and it's been so edifying. And I hope to, in the next few weeks, bring some of them in to the process. And one of the main ways that I would love to do that is through voice work. Those stories, to have additional voices, especially the female voices. I have one individual that I want to bring on to do some of the female voice work. And because when I'm doing it and I'm putting that pitch adjustment on there, it's not the same. So look, I got to tell you a funny story about that. Okay, so please.
So, being a creative, and for 4 years, I've done it all myself. I did all the writing. I did all the art, not that I had time to draw, but I would do whatever thumbnails and all that kind of stuff. And then when Chris came on board, he started doing, where Chris is really helping the show is he's making connections like this. This is how and plus his art, then his voice work, but still, right.
That's awesome.
But at the end of the day, the vast majority of the creative process is on my shoulders.
Right.
Well, then part of that reason is because it's my vision. Well, part of that, but now I'm starting to realize if we're ever going to be where I want it to be, other people are going to have to be able to play in the playground, right?
Yeah. No,
So,
true.
so what you do is, as a creator, like you're saying, is you say, okay, here's what I need from you. You're playing in my world. Here's what I need from you. This is how it needs to be. So kind of what I've had people in the past go, I want to write for your show, but I could tell one, bless their hearts, they're not writers.
Yeah.
Right. So you got to be able to write first. And then two, they never listened to my show. They just saw it as an opportunity to get their work out. Now, if you're going to listen to my show, and you want to write a story that fits into my show, I will give you full credit for that. But you're not supporting me, so I'm not going to support you in that endeavor. But to get to what you're saying is, I have people in my family who have not listened to one show, but yet I have at the moment we have only 3 patrons right on our Patreon, and they pay us every month. And we put out what we can on there. The goal is to put out more for them, like you're saying. Right. But they've never met us, man. Never met us, and they love us enough that they're going to try in their own way in this tough economy to support us. So we take that extremely seriously.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, so you had said something about Michael Heiser. I want to touch base on Michael Heiser. When I first listened to him, I was it's about 2009, and I just spent 20 years of my life as an atheist rejecting Christianity, and I just kind of come back into the fold, and really starting to go, okay, I need to understand one, what is really going on spiritually, right? So I was going to church, I was studying the Bible, I was getting into that, and I came across him, and that's some heavy stuff. When he starts talking about the divine counsel and all that, and he starts putting it in the framework of what the people thought, 2,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, man, it was too heavy for me, and it didn't fit with what was being taught in the churches I was attending. Right. So I was not spiritually mature enough to understand it. And then as I during my journey in my own studies and God lead me where God was leading me, and I would go back from time to time and I would touch on that. And at first I heard it and I thought it was heresy. You think it's heresy because it doesn't fit what was being taught by seminarians in the West. Right. So then, I ended up buying his that first book, The Unseen Realm. And man,
amazing book.
What a read. A read. And, and when I would try to approach this and bring him up with some of my pastor friends, one, nobody's ever heard of him, which is shameful, right? And then number two, when I tried to explain what he was doing, no, we don't even going to go there. So he has been very important in my theology as well. And then you were talking about comic books. I too have gone away from Marvel and DC because of how woke they've become. But I still collect comic books. It's all the different titles from like Image and Dark Horse and stuff. I literally have a 2-foot stack right here that I need to read that I'm going to start reading as soon as this is over. Because my wife is like, if you're gonna keep buying them, I want you to read them.
I got a whole shelf of manga now that I just finally started. If I was like, even if I just read it little by little, I need to be reading it because why have it if I'm not going to read it?
Right? Yeah. Yeah. And, my son is really big into manga, and it influences his art style. And he's got a comic book called Mighty Snail that he sells, and very underground kind of thing. And he loves being an underground comic artist, but it's heavily inspired by manga. And this used to be his room, and he moved out last month, which is sad, but it's also part of the journey. Right. Yeah. But literally this whole wall behind me was filled with just bookshelves of manga. Just hundreds of volumes of manga. So, and of course, every once in a while I would pick up a title and get into whichever title that was. But the problem is again, time, the most important thing that we don't have enough of. And, some of those manga titles, there's hundreds and hundreds of volumes of them, of one title.
Yes, no, some of them go on really long. That's I've picked up some of the shorter ones, some of the more contained ones that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. But I appreciate that too, because even with Western comics, it's kind of shooting itself in the foot, because it's really hard to have characters that exist in this vacuum that how do you get new people in while trying to keep the lifers? I don't envy them. But the direction that they've gone in is just abhorrent. It's become propaganda for far leftist ideologues. I mean, it really has. And so I had to nope out. I was done, and it broke my heart, because I mean, when I tell you I was a Marvel fanboy, it was pathetic. Like
I'm with you, dude. I'm with you. You know,
yeah,
I quit a long time ago. It was. I've still got long boxes upon long boxes full. And, but it just got to the point where I'm like, this is bull. I can't read this anymore. You know, what happened?
How much longer are you going to emasculate my childhood heroes? You know, I was like, I'm done.
Yes.
I'm done.
And it doesn't make sense anymore to me. Of course, I'm old. So, then that's what they'll say. Well, you're just too old. No.
But you know what?
That narrative doesn't fly, because if you look at the sales, I was literally
I was just about to say that.
So you look at the sales. Now a comic book costs you $5, $4.99.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's a fraction. They're selling a fraction, and it's not the price. It's not the price. Yeah, it's expensive to buy a comic book nowadays, but it's not a price. It's the story that's tanking the sales.
Yes, absolutely.
There's nothing.
So, all right. So,
sorry.
Yeah, right. No. You're good. And so that's why all these titles that I've got here, they have nothing to do with superheroes. They're not anything to do with Marvel. And, and they're narratives that, in some cases are still a little woke, but they're good narratives. At the end of the day, it's still a good story. But people are leaving that kind of stuff, and they're trying to find good storytelling, which ultimately leads them to folks like us. Right.
Yeah.
So
we need to provide something that is, we as creatives need to provide something, an alternative, but not just an alternative. No, it's like, no, I don't want to be just a Christian creative, like you said. Like, no, I'm a creative that is also a Christian. And I think because we have a relationship with the Creator, that should very much reflect in how we approach these things. And I think that's been lost very much in the West. And I think there are a lot of people trying to recapture that. Unfortunately, there's a lot more of conservative creatives, which is good, but no, I think we as Christians, again, who have a relationship with the Creator of all things, man, we should be setting the standard, and we're just not.
Yeah.
We're just not. So I want to do that. I want to try and do that. So I love that you guys are trying to do that too. I have to say as well, speaking of just creative in general, like, I love what you guys do, and it's been very, my mind is always go, oh, did we lose? I think we lost him. Uh-oh. Did we lose Chris?
Go ahead, keep going. I'm going to let him back.
Oh, okay. So like I said, I've been inspired by you guys too, because I like that you've created this sandbox that you play in, and you tell your stories within this world that you've created. I think it's awesome, and I'm toying around with some ideas as well for myself, and for because the current, what I'm trying to produce right now is too much. But I'm hoping that maybe if I can produce, like going back to what you said, Alan, quality instead of quantity. But then if I could offer something, especially to my patrons, that focused more on the storytelling element, kind of not necessarily all the theological stuff, but intertwine that a little bit, like you guys try to do. And I love the 612. That's really cool. But telling stories in a sandbox with characters and with a world. And I don't know what that looks like yet, or what it looks like yet for me, but I love what you guys are doing, and I'm trying to see how can I adapt something similar for my patrons. And as I do that, as the Lord allows, invite you guys to be a part of that process as well. Would be really fun to try and bring our creativity together would be really exciting.
Okay, so that excites me because I got to tell you this. I was driving down the road. I'm writing this Tiberius Poe story, who is our gumshoe detective that we pulled from very similar influences. And I was driving down the road and I said, Nelly needs to narrate this. Nelly needs to narrate it. He needs to tell this story. I'm going to write it. So, Brother Nelly, there's a day coming where I'm going to reach out to you and go, would you honor us with, and look, this is huge. I have never let anybody narrate a story because they don't have a narration style. I've got, even the creatives I know, they struggle. They may be good writers, but they are struggling to tell the story in a way that engages you with inflection and pulls you in. You can do that, brother. So I was like, I was driving down the road and I was like, Lord, am I getting ready to ask somebody else to narrate one of my stories? This is exciting.
You let me know. You let me know. I would love to. That'd be so exciting. I'd love to. And whether it's narrating a story or whether I become a citizen of Nevermore Hollows, a reoccurring individual that pops in. You let me know. That'd be really fun. Because as I'm developing, I don't know. Like you said, it's this idea that's still trying to be fleshed out in my head. But I want to engage my most faithful listeners also. And some of them that want to be a part of it. And it's like, how can I do that? And so if I could create a world that they can very much be a part of, kind of like what you guys have done. So just know you guys have equally inspired me as well. And I would, you just let me know, man. I'd love to collaborate and see, as the Lord leads, that'd be great.
Yeah. And same here,
cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Same here, man. If we can ever help any way, man, that's our hearts. One of the things is in lovers of music, one of the things I liked back in the day, I was really into the grunge scene, and you'd see those videos back in the day, and all those bands were up on stage together at some point, interacting with each other, and they weren't even signed. They were just in the clubs. They were doing it. So where I'm going with this thought is we're kind of like those grungy punk bands. Yeah. We're always trying to make a name for ourselves, but in the podcast world, what I love about it is there is a willingness to collaborate. There's the idea that there's enough success out there for all of us. Let's lift each other up. And especially when you find a kindred spirit, when God leads you to a kindred spirit, you go, oh my gosh, we have to collaborate with this person. And that was Chris. That was Chris when he said, we got to talk to Nelly. We got to talk to Nelly.
And I appreciate that.
Oh, you're a good dude. And the fact that your other job is so very important that you incorporate your two loves, together, and it's good. It's not in your face,
Yeah.
And like we were talking about earlier, it's you. I can't find the words. I'm sorry, but
you're good. But I appreciate it because that's my goal. That's one of the things I want to do is I wanted to be compelling without being preachy, and I think there's there's a way to do that, and I haven't perfected it by any stretch, but I'm really trying, but it's a natural flow from my life, and I know that I hope that doesn't sound too cocky, but I mean people don't see me when people see me. They don't think Christian. They don't think pastor because I don't wear it on my forehead or actually I do have a tattoo that it's an ambigram. It says Lord and Savior this way. And then it says Jesus Christ this way. So even my tattoos are I try to use them as a means of creating conversations. But when people find out what I do, they're like, wait, so you're a pastor? And I don't get insulted by that because I don't look like what they think a pastor should look like, but they're already disarmed. They already put their weapons down. And I say, actually, I am a pastor. I love the Bible. And they're like, but doesn't the Bible have this, this, and this? I say, you know what? No. I said, it does say this, this, and this. But some of those other things you've been told are not true, because they'll immediately, a non-believer will look at me and say, but aren't you going to hell for all them tattoos? And I'm like, it's funny because like it's like, who are you to tell me? It's like you haven't no relationship with God, haven't read his word, and it's like, but they know some of the religiosity that's out there in the West. And they're like, but aren't your tattoos going to send you to hell? And I'm like, let me talk to you, but they've already initiated the theological. They're now asking me about the Bible, and they didn't even realize that they were doing that.
I love it. Well, it goes back to that being the lure. You were a lure that drew them in.
Yes.
So that is beautiful. So let me ask you a question. We're coming up on an hour and a half, and this has been an amazing conversation. We've got to know you a little bit better. We've got to understand your worldview better. We've got to understand your creative process better, and what all these wonderful things. So if we were to leave it at this, because I always struggle with this question, people will go, well, which one of your episodes should I watch or listen to? Oof. Wow, that's a tough one. Which one would you say, this is the one that I think would draw you in the most and let you understand what this show's about? What is it for the Dancing Toaster?
Oh, man, that is a great question and a really hard one. I think honestly, I'm gonna be bold and actually say the Rain Man episode just recently.
Okay.
I and the reason I say that is because I've had time to perfect my craft. I've had time to develop my voice, my approach, my creative style. It's had time to mature and to develop. Whereas earlier episodes, you can tell I'm kind of all over the place a little bit. It's just shotgun blast, and it's, I think I'm biting off more than I can chew, So the Rain Man episode, and another reason I say that is because I had a discussion just recently with somebody. I won't say who they are because it'll look like I'm clout chasing, and I don't have their permission to tell everybody that I was meeting with them and having a discussion with them. But somebody that of note that I was surprised that they wanted to have a talk with me. And so we're having this discussion, and they said, one of the things that sticks out about you is the fact that it's very clear that you're a pastor. Your shepherd's voice comes through as you're telling these stories and as you're reaching out to your audience. And they told me to really lean into that. And that meeting took place the week prior to the Rain Man episode. So as I was doing the writing for that, something that I try, I almost try to cover up, it's kind of like, but what I'm saying is, like, my heart broke while I was doing the Rain Man episode. You hear it. Like I'm in the booth and I'm asking myself, do I need to do another take? But you want to know what? I tried 3 times, and every time I broke in the same place, because there's this emotional buildup that I'm like, man, I really, my heart connected with this guy. And again, I hope he found peace. I don't know if he ever did. And that kind of, afterwards, when I found out he died, I was like, oh man, bummer, because my wife, she told me that, and she was actually the one that found out he passed. In my research, I was embarrassed that I didn't come across that detail, but she was going to send him the episode if he was still around. She's my biggest fan and support. I love her to death. And she's not even into this stuff like I am, but she's the first to listen every Tuesday, and I love her for it. But the Rain Man episode, that episode, it presents you with one of my favorite things to talk about. Isn't cryptids, but it is the more spiritual themes, so ghosts and possessions. I enjoyed that material more than the cryptids, if I'm being frank. So I'm talking about something that's a little more in my wheelhouse and a little more on brand, because is it a ghost? Is it a possession? What is it? So but then you also get to hear, I care about the people that I'm talking about, and I want to remind my listeners, these are people, and it's so easy to forget. As we talk about all these things, we can talk about them up here, but I want to bring them down here, not only to make them more relatable and more real, like, hey, this might have actually happened to somebody, but somebody that you could have ran into at the grocery store, or in a pizza shop, like with Rain Man, So, I think it's allowed me to develop as a creative, and it lets you hear a unique take. You get to hear my storytelling prowess, but you also get to hear, like, this guy's a pastor, a Bible teacher, a shepherd of people. And I love how that episode came out with the warts, and not that it's a wart that I start getting choked up, but it's like, no, I tried to re-record it and I fell apart all over again. And that's how I was like, okay, Lord, I'm not going to fight this. I'm going to let it be in there. And, because of what that man was sharing with me the week prior, that was like, no, this is what makes you so different. As a pastor, you bring that to the table with you. Don't hide that. He said, lean into it. And, I said, okay, I'm gonna, and his words came back to me as I was recording, and I was like, no, I'm gonna let people hear that I care about the people that listen to my show. I care about,
Right.
That's been hard, because as the listener base grows and people reach out, it can get a little daunting as people reach out. And I got people here that need me immediately. They take priority. I'm just being frank, like the people, my sheep, I'm going to answer to God for the people that he's entrusted me, so they take priority. And not that my listeners are second best. It's like, no, but I'm one man. And the internet, as it increases our platforms, it can be challenging. And I'm wrestling with some of those things as it grows too. But in any case, the Rain Man episode, I think is a great starting place. Second to that, if I'm going to cheat a little bit, second to that, episode 5 or 6, when I dealt with the ghost theme, I can't remember which one it was where I talked about, probably episode 6. I talked about a French Canadian soldier during World War I. And his brother appears to him in the bunker in the night that it was bombed. His brother, who was dead, who died earlier in the war, appears to him. And I love that episode so much. So I almost said that one, but I was still trying to find myself a little bit. And so maybe I wouldn't recommend that one right away, because it's very heavy theologically. Whereas the lighter episodes, it's not that they're not heavy theologically, but I break them down a little bit more. I make them a little more approachable. And I'm taking now case by case. Whereas in that episode, I cover like 3 ghost stories. Whereas now it's like, I'm going to cover one story and I'm going to cover it thoroughly. So Rain Man, boom, there it is.
All right.
Well, as an artist, the true art is in the imperfection. You can have something that's perfect and technically perfect, and it looks pretty. But to me, when you look at a piece of art and you can see that this person put their whole self into it, and there are some things that aren't plumb, you know what I'm saying? And so the fact that you broke up during that part, I believe I remember listening to it and I was like, oh wow, I had to get myself, because I'm working with a bunch of guys and I can't get up,
right?
Over a story. But no, that makes it more real. That makes it more personal, and it makes it better.
Yeah. And people resonate with the truth. That was a true moment, so people resonate with it. So,
right.
So, Chris, let me ask you this. Nelly has given us what he thinks would draw people in. What would you suggest to our listeners would be an episode to listen to? And then I'm going to do the same before we sign off.
Well, as always, my favorite episode is Them Trailer Park Witches.
No, I mean for Nelly. For Nelly.
Oh, for Nelly. Oh,
yeah. Thank you, by the way, Brother Chris.
Excuse me. Well, all of them, but my very first one that I listened to, I started out from the beginning, and then something happened, and so I went to the Ghostbusters episode, and I learned a lot. A lot. I'm a big Ghostbusters fan, so I did not know that Dan Aykroyd and his family were spiritualists, and so that right there got me going into, oh, okay, I'm going to listen to more. And then I went back. I've gone through the entire catalog now, and and I'm one of those people. I will start from the back, and go to the front. But or the other way around. And so yeah, I think the Ghostbusters episode is cool. I like the episodes or stories where you were talking about possession, the one about Roland Doe, and stuff like that. Anything that scares me is something I'm going to be interested in.
Yeah.
I can listen to cryptid stories. I can listen to alien stories. All that stuff all day long. I don't like movies about possession. So I will listen to stories about it just because. In the past, people have asked me why I'm into the cryptids and supernatural type stuff, and I'm like, well, to me, it's like when a sports team watches video of another team.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to learn their playbook.
Yeah.
And so, but ultimately, you also see God's power and God's glory in a lot of these stories, to where, especially Roland Doe, where, when it was done, and it was, and it's just, and praise God, this young man went on to live a normal life,
Right.
which was like a great reward, so yeah, but well, like I told my daughter the other night, I said, look, this guy's a pastor. I said, but he doesn't take himself too seriously. I said, he's a nerd enough to be into all this other stuff. I said, but he comes at it from a biblical side, which is a lot of people don't, and that's the kind of side that I want to hear.
Yeah.
I've got a sticker right here on my drawing table that says "I believe," and it's got a picture of Bigfoot.
It's cool.
And I do. I believe in. Of course, I don't believe in aliens, because if there are intergalactic hyper intelligent individuals, I don't think they'll come here, because we're crazy. But if they do come here, I think they're tourists. I think this is like going to Lion Country Safari or something. Just to see let's go see what the humans are doing, because they're weird.
Right. Look, that is funny, Chris. I've heard you say that before, and it cracks me up every time. One of the things that you said just now that I'll end my part on is, I love how you always say, listen to these stories and stuff like that, is kind of when they're supposedly true, is it's looking at the other sports teams' playbook. I like that, 'cause you got to know what they're up to so you can fight them. So I will say this: if I was to have to choose an episode, brother, it's going to be hard, because I love every one of them I've listened to so far. And there's a couple that I haven't listened to yet, because I'm like, no, I want to save that for when I'm totally alone and I can just listen to it, which I am tonight. My family just left. They're all going doing their stuff tonight. So I'm going to be delving into the Dancing Toaster episodes I've not listened to yet.
That's
but I
exciting.
would have to say, as good as every one of them are, my favorite one so far would be the lenses in green hell. Red lenses in green hell. Look,
Yeah,
such a good one. Such a good one. And
well,
and
again,
it's
go
go ahead.
ahead, dude. Sorry. Well, I just said that's something I knew a little bit about, but again, Nelly goes into it deeper, which is what I want. So I was, once he stepped off the cliff and let's go into it, I'm like, yeah, let's go. So yeah.
Yeah. And see, I'd already done the research on those glasses, because there's going to be a story in Nevermore Hollows where a pair shows up. So it was perfect timing, because I'd done that research a few months ago. And then when I heard that, and again, like Chris said, there were some nuggets in there. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. So that just helps me when I go to actually write that story. But it's so well done. and how you get Vinny and Dr. Wright in there, and y'all have those discussions throughout the episode and at the end. It's just really well done. I think for me, that was one where I could see, even though I'd listened to a couple of others prior to that, as you're getting to, and you've said, I could tell there's where you're starting to find your voice.
Yeah.
In that episode, you could tell he's finding who he is and what he's wanting to do creatively. So I will, if we're all good with that, I'll end this wonderful interview here, because we've given everybody an insight to who Nelly is, what the Dancing Toaster is, and we've each picked an episode for somebody to go out there and listen to. All three of these are going to be gateway drugs for you. You're going to be jonesing on the Dancing Toaster the next few days, I'm telling you. So we really appreciate you, Brother Nelly, and we're praying that your show is successful spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and financially for you. And we're excited to maybe be moving forward to having a deeper relationship with you, because I think we're all on the same page, the same goal. Yeah. We're trying to glorify God with the gifts He's given us, and we see this as a mission field. So,
I think Nelly needs to meet some denizens of Nevermore.
Oh yeah.
I'd love to.
We've talked to a lot of folks, but we've only written a few into the show, and they're very special friends of ours now. There will be a Nelly character that shows up in Nevermore Hollows, and he's going to have some stuff to do.
I'm honored. That means a lot. Thank you guys for letting me be a part of the show, and for all the incredibly kind things you said. I'm very flattered, and thank God for you guys, and I look forward to seeing what the Lord does with our shows and with us creatively, and let's see what the Lord does. And even as we grow, it's like one of the things that, if the Lord does allow my platform to elevate, as my prayer and desire is, it's like one thing I never want to do. And I tell the Lord, like, Lord, let me never forget my day ones. Let me not forget the ones that supported me when when nobody cared and when nobody paid any attention. And so, you guys have been an incredible blessing, and whatever the Lord does with us, I will certainly not forget Chris and Alan. So thank you.
Same here. You have my same. That's my heart too. I always tell my wife, I'm like, if God takes us where I'm hoping us, because we're still a tiny show, surprisingly. I say that surprisingly because our fans are real, true, honest fans, and they know that we're trying to create something special, and they always say, how is this show not any bigger? Well, I'd ask the same thing about your show, but God has a purpose. He's got a plan. He will grow us when He's ready to grow us. And I'm excited because I think He's going to grow us together. I think we're going to see your platform grow, our platform grow. We're going to be able to collab with each other and be used very powerfully in the kingdom. And so I will say this, Brother Nelly, it's been a wonderful conversation, and everybody out there who is a Nevermore Hollows fan, you will be a Dancing Toaster fan. You just got to go give it a listen, man. You're going to love it. And I thank everybody for listening tonight. Thank you, Brother Nelly. Chris is having some technical issues, but we love you, Chris, and we will see y'all next time.
Report suspicious activities and call 911 for immediate response. Expect delay.
Nobody else will be taken from the south. Stand by.
Flight 022, maintain approach. You're clear for runway.
Expect traffic delays and restrictions. Take personal security precautions to avoid becoming a victim of an attack. Avoid crowded public areas and gatherings.
Roger, 527, maintaining northbound, runway 8 kilo, holding.
Do not travel in areas affected by the attack or in a known area of elevated virus activity. Keep emergency supplies accessible and a full thing of gas at all times.
Be careful.
Government officials